east, west, north. South are more secure and more prosperous because we stood together for the ideals we share. And this story of human progress was by no means limited to Europe. Indeed, the ideals that came to define our alliance also inspired movements across the globe among those very people. Ironically, who had too often been denied their full rights by Western powers. After the Second World War, people from Africa to India threw off the yoke of colonialism to secure their independence. In the United States, citizens took freedom rides and endured. Beatings to put an end to segregation and to secure their civil rights. As the Iron Curtain fell here in Europe, the iron fist of apartheid was unclenched. And Nelson Mandela emerged upright, proud, from prison to lead a multiracial democracy. Latin American nations rejected dictatorship and built new democracies. And Asian nations showed that development and democracy could go hand in hand. Young people in the audience today, young people like Laura, were born in a place and a time where there is less conflict. More prosperity and more freedom than any time in human history. But that's not because man's darkest impulses have vanished. Even here, in Europe, we've seen ethnic cleansing in the Balkans that shocked the conscience. The difficulties of integration and globalization. Recently amplified by the worst economic crisis of our lifetimes, strained the European project and stirred the rise of a politics that too often targets immigrants or gays or those who seem somehow different. While technology has opened up vast opportunities for trade and innovation and cultural understanding. It's also allowed terrorists to kill on a horrifying scale. Around the world, sectarian warfare and ethnic conflicts continue to claim thousands of lives. And once again, we are confronted with the belief among some that bigger nations can. Bully smaller ones to get their way, that recycled maxim that might somehow makes right. So I come here today to insist that we must never take for granted the progress that has been won here. In Europe and advanced around the world, because the contest of ideas continues for your generation. And that's what's at stake in Ukraine today. Russia's leadership is challenging truths that only a few weeks ago seemed self-evident, that in the 21st century, the borders of Europe cannot be redrawn with force, that international law matters. That people and nations can make their own decisions about their future. To be honest, if we defined our interests narrowly, if we applied a cold-hearted calculus, we might decide to look the other way. Our economy is not deeply integrated with Ukraine's. Our people and our homeland face no direct threat from the invasion of Crimea. Our own borders are not threatened by Russia's annexation. But that kind of casual indifference would ignore the lessons that are written in the cemeteries of this continent. It would allow the old way of doing things to regain a foothold in this young century. And that message would be heard not just in Europe, but in Asia and the Americas, in Africa and the Middle East. And the consequences that would arise from complacency are not abstractions. The impact that they have on the lives of real people, men and women just like us have to enter into our imaginations. Just look at the young people of Ukraine who were determined to take back their future from a government rotted. By corruption. The portraits of the fallen shot by snipers, the visitors who pay their respects at the Maidan. There was the university student, wrapped in the Ukrainian flag. Expressing her hope that every country should live by the law. A postgraduate student, speaking of her fellow protesters. Saying, I want these people who are here to have dignity. Imagine that you are the young woman who said, there are some things that fear, police sticks and tear gas cannot destroy. We've never met these people, but we know them. Their voices echo calls for human dignity that rang out in European streets and squares for generations. Their voices echo those around the world who at this very moment fight for their dignity. These Ukrainians rejected a government that was stealing from the people instead of serving them. And are reaching for the same ideals that allow us to be here today. None of us can know for certain what the coming days will bring in Ukraine. But I am confident that eventually those voices for human dignity and opportunity and individual rights and rule of law, those voices ultimately will triumph. I believe that over the long haul, as nations that are free, as free people, the future is ours. I believe this not because I'm naive, and I believe this not because of the strength of our arms or the size of our economies. I believe this because these ideals that we affirm are true, these ideals are universal. Yes, we believe in democracy with elections that are free and fair, and independent judiciaries and opposition parties. Civil society and uncensored information so that individuals can make their own choices. Yes, we believe in open economies based on free markets and innovation. And individual initiative and entrepreneurship, and trade and investment that creates a broader prosperity. And, yes, we believe in human dignity, that every person is created equal, no matter who you are. Or what you look like, or who you love, or where you come from. That is what we believe. That's what makes us strong. And our enduring strength is also reflected in our respect for an international system. That protects the rights of both nations and people, a United Nations and a Universal Declaration of Human Rights. International law and the means to enforce those laws. But we also know that those rules are not self-executing. They depend on people and nations of goodwill continually affirming them. And that's why Russia's violation of international law, its assault on Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity must be met with condemnation. Not because we're trying to keep Russia down. But because the principles that have meant so much to Europe and the world must be lifted up. Over the last several days, the United States, Europe, and our partners around the world have been united in defense of these ideals, and united in support of the Ukrainian people. Together, we've condemned Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and rejected the legitimacy of the Crimean referendum. Together, we have isolated Russia politically. Suspending it from the G8 nations and downgrading our bilateral ties. Together, we are imposing costs through sanctions that have left a mark on Russia and those accountable for its actions. And if the Russian leadership stays on its current course, together we will ensure that this isolation deepens. Sanctions will expand. And the toll on Russia's economy, as well as its standing in the world, will only increase. And meanwhile, the United States and our allies will continue to support the government of Ukraine as they chart a democratic course. Together, we are going to provide a significant package of assistance that can help stabilize the Ukrainian economy. And meet the basic needs of the people. Make no mistake, neither the United States nor Europe has any interest in controlling Ukraine. We have sent no troops there. What we want is for the Ukrainian people to make their own decisions. Just like other free people around the world. Understand, as well, this is not another Cold War that we're entering into. After all, unlike the Soviet Union, Russia leads no bloc of nations, no global ideology. The United States and NATO do not seek any conflict with Russia. In fact, for more than 60 years. We have come together in NATO not to claim other lands, but to keep nations free. What we will do always is uphold our solemn obligation. Our Article 5 duty to defend the sovereignty and territorial integrity of our allies. And in that promise we will never waver. NATO nations never stand alone. Today, NATO planes patrol the skies over the Baltics, and we've reinforced our presence in Poland. And we're prepared to do more. Going forward, every NATO member state must step up and carry its share of the burden by showing the political will to invest in our collective defense. And by developing the capabilities to serve as a source of international peace and security. Of course, Ukraine is not a member of NATO in part because of its close and complex history with Russia. Nor will Russia be dislodged from Crimea or deterred from further escalation by military force. But with time, so long as we remain united, the Russian people will recognize that they cannot achieve security. Prosperity and the status that they seek through brute force. And that's why, throughout this crisis, we will combine our substantial pressure on Russia with an open door for diplomacy. I believe that for both Ukraine and Russia, a stable peace will come through de-escalation. Direct dialogue between Russia and the government of Ukraine and the international community. Monitors who can ensure that the rights of all Ukrainians are protected. A process of constitutional reform within Ukraine, and free and fair elections this spring.